It's funny, I started to do everything that the doctors recommended. So I was taking medication as prescribed, I was exercising regularly, swimming, my executive functioning was poor, my sleep was inconsistent. I would have to take extra medication periodically just to keep myself from going into these elevated mood states. I would have weird symptoms like rage and frustration, and medications that we know or that I know now cause a lot of metabolic harm. One of the meds I was on, it's called olanzapine. It causes people to gain 20, 30, 50 pounds or more when they're on this medication because it causes so much metabolic dysfunction. Now that we're starting to understand psychiatric illness as metabolic disease manifesting as brain problems and weird behavior, it makes me wonder whether a lot of these meds did more harm than good, if they were impacting my metabolism negatively.
Welcome to the Plant-Free MD podcast with Dr. Anthony Chaffee, where we discuss diet and nutrition and how this affects health and chronic disease, and show you how you can use this to optimize your health and happiness, both mentally and physically. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Plant-Free MD podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Chaffee, and today I have a very special guest, Mr. Matt Baszucki, who is here to tell us about his personal story with nutrition and health. Matt, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me on. Did you say plant-free? I like that.
Plant-free, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the whole idea. Yeah, it was the reason I went carnivore in the first place and just started eating meat only was because I had a professor of cancer biology when I was in my undergrad back in around 2000 at the University of Washington in Seattle, and he was telling us how toxic plants were and how they had all these carcinogens and all these other sorts of things. And because there's cancer.
How dare you?
Yeah, I know. And he was talking about how just a lot of these toxins, they defend themselves chemically. Like that's how plants stay alive in the wild, right? And so a lot of these things can actually be carcinogenic. And so it was like Brussels sprouts had 136 identified carcinogens at the time back in 2000. Mushrooms had over 100, but also spinach and broccoli and kale and cucumbers and everything else that we've eaten, had dozens. And so we were, blown away by this. And he, when we sort of settled down and realized that he wasn't joking and he was serious, I remember thinking in my head, I was like, well, this guy is like, oh, it's crazy. This guy's serious, but vegetables are still good for you though, right? Because you just, you're drilled with that since you're a kid. And he looked at us and he just sort of gave us this weird look and he just said, yeah, I don't eat salad. I don't eat vegetables. I don't let my kids eat vegetables. Plants are trying to kill you. And I'm like, right, done. I'm just gonna walk away from plants. And so that was it.
Wow.
I just defaulted into eggs and meat. And I felt amazing. Felt better than I ever had in my life. And I did that for a number of years. And then I slipped off of it. I was playing professional rugby in England and sort of slipped off of it because some of the meat was sort of breaded. And I sort of convinced myself, well, dose makes the poison. Maybe it's not all that much, but it made a big difference. It made a big impact. And it wasn't until sort of, 6.5 years ago now that I sort of rediscovered that and sort of started thinking about it from a biological point of view that, humans have been apex predators for 2 million years. And that's what we've been exposed to the longest is just eating meat. It's only more recently that we've been more exposed to plants, certainly the large scale agriculture that we've experienced in the last 10,000 years. And so, we don't have necessarily all the built up defenses towards these plant toxins that, herbivores would have. And so I said, okay, well, that makes sense, and that's what I was doing those 5 years that I've never felt better in my entire life, never played better, never performed better as an athlete or scholastically as a student. That was what I was doing. I was sort of eating to our biological design. I was like, right, I knew it. I knew plants were trying to kill me, get rid of these stupid things. And I just went back to just eating meat and just felt amazing. And I was, I'm 44 now. I was 38 at the time. And I at 38, I all of a sudden felt like I was 22 again. And I just felt so good. I went back and started playing high level rugby and just, started feeling amazing and started really looking into this and digging into the research on it. And that's sort of where this podcast came about, is just trying to share my sort of experiences with others on that.
That's amazing. Yeah, I've never heard the plant, the toxic plants thing, but it makes me wonder how deep the misinformation goes if virtually everything that I've been told about nutrition since I was a kid has been either completely debunked or heavily questioned now. The food
Mm.
pyramid and all, and the carbs and the bread and all this stuff that I was taught. But this plants thing I've never heard. That is wild.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely new, but it's something well, it's new and it's old because it's something that we've known. I mean, botanists know this very well. There's an interesting guy named Professor George Diggs on YouTube, Diggs, and he has a number of lectures, lectures on specifically this, all the different ways that plants defend themselves and use these toxins to defend themselves, and actually how these are also in the plants that we eat. The WHO has a whole web page dedicated towards naturally occurring toxins in food. Every single one is either a plant, mushroom, or an algae. And then some of those algae can get into seafood, and then we can get them
Hmm.
through that. But it's not the animal, the meat, the seafood. It's the algae. And these are things that we typically eat, and there are a lot of accounts on CDC talks about this, where a plant they can make you very sick. There's beans, legumes, they have a lot of lectins that are quite toxic, and this is why you have to cook them and soak them and do all that, because if you eat them uh uncooked, they can kill you. They can actually kill you. And so we detoxify these things and lower their toxic load by cooking them, soaking them in lye, fermenting them. These are all traditional means of lowering the toxic load of plants.
Hmm.
But they were traditionally done in people that were poor. The wealthy people had access to meat. They would eat more meat, and then maybe the idea of cuisine came in to European cultures a while ago. But typically, when you could afford meat, you got meat, and you ate the sort of the plants when in the more poorer communities but they had to they went through these different sorts of processes to sort of detoxify and lower their toxic load. Tamales, for instance, that comes from the word nixtamalization, which was the original way that the Mesoamericans used to treat corn. And they would soak it in lye and do some other things for like 24 hours, and that would
Hmm.
break down some of the toxins and release some of the nutrients like
Hmm.
niacin, things like that. And there's a whole rash of death that happened from nutritional deficiencies in niacin called pellagra, which is the niacin deficiency. And people were dying from this in a large scale. They thought it was an infectious disease. It turned out they were just eating a whole bunch of corn, but they weren't putting it through this process. And so they weren't getting the niacin out of it, and they were dying from niacin deficiency. And yeah, so it does go back, but um, we know that in the fossil record, when the megafauna died out, that people had to go to different sorts of means, and you had like the North American in the North Americans in the Great Plains, they still had access to the American buffalo, and they had a lot of meat available. So they were just eating meat really until the end of the 18th century or 1800s, when the bison herds were wiped out. Native Australians, same thing. They were basically eating meat largely up until a century ago, and same with the Inuit, until they were incorporated into Western society and started getting more access to Western food. I mean, before that, they were just eating seal and whale and things like that, things that they caught and trapped and hunted. And they've gotten a lot sicker as a result. They haven't had 10,000 years to
Right.
adapt to these
Right.
sorts of different ways of eating. And so they actually have a far higher rate of chronic disease than European Americans, for instance. And so, I think that's you know completely to do with just eating the wrong thing. We're eating things that we're not designed for, just like animals in the zoo. They have signs that say, don't feed the animals. It makes them very sick to eat something that they're not adapted to, or they're not designed for, that they don't eat in the wild. And we forget that, those same biological laws apply to us. And you look back in the fossil record, at every point that agriculture came into practice, the same thing happened all around the world, regardless of the time or location or the type of crop that humans went to. The same things happened. The height and health and brain size of the population actually decreased markedly. It
Yeah.
dropped by like 5, 6 inches on average, smaller jaws, crooked teeth,
Yeah.
more poor wound healing, infectious disease, signs of tuberculosis in the bones, and the brain size went down. So adult male brains dropped by 11%, adult female brains dropped by 17%. And that
Wow.
happened, all these things happened immediately. It didn't take hundreds of years or thousands of years. It was just overnight. And then, and that persisted, so, and then we saw this in real time with the Native Americans and Inuit and Native Australians. So, we're seeing that sort of in real time. So I think a lot of this is to do with eating plants that we're really not designed for. Obviously, with the grains and the carbs and those sorts of things that completely disrupts and rearranges our metabolism and how our brain functions and our body
Yeah.
functions.
Yeah.
And so, and I think that's a big part of that, but it's just sort of the same principle that we're eating things that we're not designed for, and it's causing a lot of harm. Hey everyone, really happy to announce a new sponsor for the show and for everybody down in Australia, Stockman Steaks, who are delivering high quality grass-fed and finished pasture-raised beef and other meats, flash frozen and vacuum sealed to your door, something that I've been enjoying a lot of myself recently as well. They also have a great range of specialty items such as high-fat keto mince and carnivore beef and organs mince with liver, kidneys, and beef heart as well. So use code Chaffee today for a free order of beef mince or another specialty gift along with your order at stockmansteaks.com.au, and I'll see you over there. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, there was interesting presentations at Metabolic Health Summit when I was there about the keto diet for cancer, and all the oncologists were talking about this, and it makes me so curious about how deep the rabbit hole is and how much of this low carb or carnivore world related to health there is to explore, and how many diseases we're treating with medications that are completely preventable with lifestyle, mainly carnivore, keto diet, or whatever it is. I don't know the exact solution. I can tell you that my own experience with, doing this diet, I was hospitalized 4 times for manic psychosis with bipolar disorder. That's basically where my story is, from 2016 to 2018. And I was having severe mood swings, psychosis, hospitalized 4 times. I was on 6 medications that cause metabolic harm, pretty much, unfortunately. And then when I went on a ketogenic diet in 2021, my symptoms disappeared. I mean, my bipolar disorder symptoms completely went away when I went on the ketogenic diet. And I was working with Dr. Chris Palmer, and I was tracking my ketones regularly. We were tracking them in the morning and in the evening, and they were usually 2.5 millimolar or above. They were pretty high, and I was watching them. And it was wild. Like, my parents and I had tried every treatment that modern medicine had to offer, every medication, every psychotherapy, treatment centers all over the country. I remember going to treatment centers and they would do DBT groups with me, but all for 7 hours a day, and they would feed me ice cream and root beer with no physical exercise. And it's like, what did you expect was going to happen? So when I implemented this and I did keto, everything changed, along with a few other cornerstone health-related habits for metabolic health: physical exercise, hard cardio, weightlifting, good sleep, blue light blockers in the evening, and sunlight in the morning, like Huberman talks about, as well as just purpose and connection. Yeah, when I got this stuff going, my life really changed, and I'm almost off all my meds. I haven't had an episode in 3 years, living on my own, working. The kinds of recoveries that really just don't happen. Like in the mental health world, when people have symptoms this severe, these kinds of recoveries don't happen. So wow, life is really good now. And yeah, Anthony, it makes me wonder. It makes me wonder how many people out there are having severe psychiatric illness, schizophrenia, depression, bipolar disorder, which we're starting to understand as an umbrella of psychiatric symptoms that are the result of metabolic dysfunction, that are maybe not individual diagnoses per se, but it's just poor metabolic health manifesting as sickness in the brain. And then when you do keto and you do some other stuff, sometimes, for a lot of people actually, this can completely reverse symptoms. I've never heard the plants thing though. So I do eat plants. I probably not as much as eggs and fish and beef and chicken. That's most of my diet, and coconut oil and stuff like that. But this is very interesting for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's amazing that you had such a recovery. I mean, this is such a this is such a debilitating issue. Any mental health issue is, but having bipolar or schizophrenia, where you're having trouble sort of dealing with the world around you, and you're acting in ways that seem normal to you but are not normal to everybody else is extremely difficult. And having such a simple and elegant solution. I mean, it may not be easy. I mean, not everybody finds it easy to change their diet radically, but it is fairly simple. It's just straightforward. Hey, you do these things and you should have this result. Yeah, the plant things is a bit interesting. I've actually found that some people that have that 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 aren't able to get full recovery just from going keto actually benefit from dropping the plants altogether. Dr. Georgia Ede, who was also a Harvard-trained psychiatrist and is the same line of thinking as Chris Palmer. Um, she just wrote a book called "Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind," and in that, she talks about all these sorts of changes and saying, hey, look, you just get rid of the alcohol and the processed foods and the sugars. That's going to make a big help. And then reduce the carbs. Okay, now really get rid of the carbs, and all these like sort of stepwise progressions and how you can improve and sort of get people there. But she has a chapter specifically on the carnivore diet, and that just specifically getting rid of the plants as well can actually help these people that have refractory cases even to the ketogenic diet, and they aren't getting as much improvement. There does seem to be either neuroinflammatory or neurotoxic substances in plants that can cause problems for people. Jordan Peterson's a good example of that.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
improved a lot of his symptoms, but then he was, just doing like hardcore keto and just a lot of fatty meat and salads. And then he dropped, but he had debilitating depression and anxiety. And then he dropped the salads, and in 3 weeks it was basically gone, and he was sort of functional again. And he even said it. He's like, salad was doing this to me. I mean, someone thinks that. Everyone thinks, oh, salads are so great, they're so good for you. But yeah, it's really interesting. Plants make about 1 million different defense chemicals, and in order to stop animals and insects from eating them, it's kill or be killed in the wild, and especially for plants. We're not crop dusting forests with pesticides to keep the insects off of them, and yet they're still there. So they're able to defend themselves and make their own pesticides. And I mean, we know this intuitively. If you get lost in the woods and you run out of food, you can't eat any random plant, right? Most of them are inedible and would make you very sick or even kill you. And so the ones that are edible, it's not that they're not toxic. Grapes and avocados will kill cats and dogs, for instance. So there are toxins in there. It's just we're better able to deal with those toxins than we are the toxins from hemlock or eucalyptus or something like that. And so it's just we have more of a tolerance, we have more of an ability to break these toxins down, but that doesn't mean those toxins don't exist. And that doesn't mean that they're not doing something subacute. What I mean? Like cyanide is toxic to everything. And that's in 3,000 different plants, such as almonds, macadamia nuts, flax seeds, cassava. Cassava makes up the staple, the number one calorie source for 750 million people in the tropics. And there was actually a rash of people getting sick in Australia from something called veggie chips, because these are made with cassava and tapioca powder, which is also high in cyanide. And it just had a higher cyanide load on this batch or something, and it just made a lot of people sick. And they don't say that. They don't say that on the bag that, hey, you could get sick from the cyanide in here. They don't put that on almonds or macadamia nuts or flaxseed, but it is there. And sort of sublethal chronic exposure to these things can cause thyroid dysfunction and neurological damage. And they don't tell anybody this. No one knows this. And so we're just walking around eating these things going, yes, vegetables are good. All these things are great. So that's sort of why I made a bit of a funny name with the plant-free MD, just to sort of catch people's attention. And I even have if you're interested, you should check out Professor George Diggs. There's a guy named Professor John Parker from Cambridge University. Well, he was professor of botany there, and the curator of their botanical gardens. And he has a YouTube video on the Cambridge YouTube channel. It's called Cambridge Ideas. It's just called Don't Eat the Plants. It's just flat out. It just talks about how toxic these things are and how all the different ways that they defend themselves. And at the end, he's just like, okay, so what do we eat? What do we do? I guess you could eat some fruits. Some fruits are safe, but if you want to eat real food without all these nasty chemicals and spines and hairs on it, he wipes away all these kiwi fruit off the table, and someone puts down a chicken in front of him. It said,
Yeah.
"Become a carnivore," and he like takes the chicken, starts eating it.
Yeah.
So it's out there, and it's really interesting. And I have a lecture that I gave at a medical conference in Australia, and I just called it "Plants Are Trying to Kill You," and so just named after my lecturer. So it's you can dip into it, but that's I think of this as a therapeutic intervention as well. You have people that are very sick, like you say. How many people are sick because of these bad nutritional guidelines? It's a lot. Mental
Yeah.
health issues have increased dramatically since the 1980s, as have cardiovascular issues, and diabetes has skyrocketed, and autoimmunity and Alzheimer's and neurodegenerative sorts of issues. We just look at autism. 1 in 10,000 people in America had autism in the 1970s. Now I think it's 1 in 34, and possibly even 1 in 22 males will now have autism now in America. So, that's a massive increase, and things that didn't need to happen. You're getting damaged neurological function and dysfunction and misdevelopment simply by eating the wrong thing, simply by eating what we've been told is the right thing, and parents being told this is the best thing for your baby, feed them this, and it's harming them, which is crazy. But you know, but to your story, which is what I wanted to know more about. How did this all start for you? How long have you well, when did your first symptoms of bipolar kick off, and how was that experience for you?
So I was having some symptoms in high school. I didn't realize it. And then I went to college. I was doing a pretty rigorous course load at UC Berkeley. I was doing some engineering stuff. That March was when I had my first episode. It's very interesting that a lot of people with this illness tend to have symptoms in March because the days, up here in the northern hemisphere at least, are getting longer very rapidly in March during the equinox, and the illness is closely tied to circadian rhythm.
Mm,
And so it's at that point where the days are getting longer and longer, but at a rapid rate, that a lot of people tend to have symptoms. And that's when my first break was in March of 2016. I started to have delusions, psychosis, mania, went a few nights without sleeping. Like you said, it all seemed real to me at the time when I was in the middle of it. And then eventually, my parents took me to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist wanted to get me to take a pill, which I thought was some test, grand test, and that I wasn't supposed to take this pill. I was
mm,
deeply delusional. And I ended up getting 5150'd, which here in the United States is a forced psychiatric hold for 72 hours, and that was extended to a 10-day hold. And so I was locked in this hospital, psychotic, delusional, for 10 days, white walls. It was very scary.
mm,
And um, it was a result of, it was a perfect storm, my parents and I like to talk about. The sleepless nights, the stress, drugs and alcohol, a lot of carbohydrates, inconsistent sleep, and all of that just came together. And I didn't correct those behaviors after I was hospitalized that time, unfortunately. I went back to drinking, I went back to doing drugs. I think especially marijuana is far more potent than it was in the 60s. And now that the
mm,
psychoactive component of the drug is exponentially more powerful than the antipsychotic component that's been artificially bred. Um, and I know incidentally, a lot of young adults who have had psychosis from smoking marijuana. But I went back to it and I was hospitalized 3 more times over the course of the next 2 years, each one for 2 weeks, each one for florid manic psychosis. And I finally achieved some insight into my condition in 2018 when for the first time, I realized something was wrong with the way I was living. I wasn't healthy. My states of mind had been too inconsistent and volatile for me to even realize that before 2018. And so I started to put some good habits in place. And it's funny, I started to do everything that the doctors recommended. So I was taking medication as prescribed. I was exercising regularly, swimming. I was watching my sleep. I was tracking my sleep in a big spreadsheet along with medication, but I was still really struggling. My executive functioning was poor. My sleep was inconsistent. I would try to I would have to take extra medication periodically just to keep myself from going into these elevated mood states. And and I didn't get better. And I would have weird symptoms like rage and frustration and mm, it was going to be a really difficult, even if I managed to stay out of the hospital. And the only way I was going to do that was by taking heavy doses of these antipsychotic medications and mood stabilizers and medications that we know or that I know now cause a lot of metabolic harm. One of the meds I was on, it's called olanzapine. It causes people to gain 20, 30, 50 pounds or more when they're on this medication because it causes so much metabolic dysfunction. Now that we're starting to understand psychiatric illness as metabolic disease manifesting as brain problems and weird behavior, it makes me wonder whether a lot of these meds did more harm than good if they were impacting my metabolism negatively.
Yeah.
And you look at things like the comorbidities between bipolar disorder and obesity, bipolar disorder and type 2 diabetes. A lot of these illnesses tend to run hand in hand in people, and we're learning that that's because these illnesses are both metabolic in nature. And so when people have poor metabolic health and they're obese, they tend to have bipolar disorder. They tend to have schizophrenia. People with these mental illnesses die on average, I think it's 15 or 20 years earlier than the general population. And that's actually because they die of traditional metabolic illness, metabolic illness um, and obesity and type 2 diabetes, things like this. So when I went on keto, 2020, my mom found Dr. Chris Palmer's work. It was very lucky that she found this. I went on keto January 4th of 2021. I cut all the carbs out. It was just chicken, beef, coconut oil, avocados. Maybe I'll cut the avocados out now. I don't know. But it was just meats. And yeah, my symptoms went away. My symptoms went away. I mean, just the I couldn't work. I couldn't do anything. And now I can, things just fell into place when I changed my diet. Everything fell into place. And keep in mind, we had tried every recommendation. My family had the means, weird treatments from transcranial magnetic stimulation at Stanford, where they shock your head to everything under the sun. And keto was what did it. Um, and really, what we know now is human beings are not meant to run on carbohydrates. Humans are not meant to run on glucose, especially incessantly. I mean, I had never, maybe a couple times in college when I was experimenting with fasting and other things, but I had never used ketones as a source of fuel in my entire life. And so when I did that, yeah, I mean, it makes sense that everyone's sick. So that's basically my story, the short version.
Yeah. No, that's great. And it is funny. We have so many very clever people trying to figure out these things, and we're doing transcranial, sort of magnetic issues. We have all these sorts of like wild medications and treatments. We're like, okay, well, will this help? Will this help? Will this help? Let's try all these sorts of things. Looking right past the fact that these issues did not exist in this level a few decades ago, and thinking like, okay, well, why don't we take a step back and think about, wait, what changed during this time? Obviously there's something in the environment. It's not genetics. We need to figure out what's the root cause, what's causing this to get better, because getting it to get worse, because it's not like there's just been, this exact percentage of people with this mental health issue, or whatever condition throughout, the records, right? It's going up, and it's going up at quite marked pace. And so I think that's the thing, is that if you want to treat symptoms, then that's one thing. But if you want to actually address the root cause, you have to take a step back and realize, okay, what changed in our environment? What did we start doing that's different? Why is it that in the 1980s and before that, it was called adult onset diabetes as opposed to type 2 diabetes and juvenile diabetes instead of type 1 diabetes, and that it was really only like middle-aged elderly alcoholics that would get adult onset diabetes. And in fact, the treatment back then for about 100 years was carbohydrate restriction. And then all of a sudden, 10-year-olds are getting adult onset diabetes, and they couldn't figure out, they didn't know what the hell was going on. Well, it's not an adult. Why is he getting adult onset diabetes? And he's got fatty liver disease. Only alcoholics get fatty liver disease. Kids never drank alcohol in his life. And so instead of realizing, hey, look, something changed, what was it? They just said, probably happening all the time. They just got misdiagnosed as type 1s. And so, we'll just call it type 2 now. And, you could make that argument once, that maybe we just didn't notice it. We're better at diagnosing it now. Okay, well, made that argument in the 90s, fine. Well, then why did it go up in the 2000s and the 2010s and now the 2020s? It's still going up. And the same thing with mental health. And so it's, sometimes you have to be, sometimes you're so sharp, you'll cut yourself trying to find these really elaborate treatments on something, a new way of how do we figure this out? And when it's just like, actually just realize that there's something that changed in the environment and try to figure out what that is. I think it's the diet. I 100% agree with you. Like, we're not designed to run on carbohydrates. We make these things. And when you stop that, you disrupt a lot of metabolic processes in your body. Insulin's a very busy hormone. It affects over 100 different mechanisms in your body. And so when if it's at a normal sort of baseline level, it's affecting everything at that level. And then we eat carbohydrates and it spikes up. It's affecting everything at that heightened level now. And now everything's out of balance. And you're going to stop your body from being able to turn over your mitochondria and heal them and repair them. And you're going to get metabolic dysfunction. You can get neuronal dysfunction, and that can manifest as mental health issues. And
Yeah.
so, if we don't recognize that, then we're not going to be able to address the root cause.
Yeah, it's funny how a lot of people think about their head separate from their bodies.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes I try to explain and I have to explain it to people, but like the food you eat becomes you.
Mhm.
Like it becomes your brain. That's what you are. Um, I see a lot of people in my generation as we've dealt with the stigma of mental illness, and that's fortunate. But the unfortunate consequence of that is that a lot of people, Gen Z, especially younger people, will run straight to medication whenever there's any kind of psychological problem, whether it's a low-level anxiety or a little bit of depression or whatever it happens to be, people will run straight to medication. When in many cases, like if we could just address the sleep, diet, exercise components, especially diet, but I mean those other two are very important. Um, how much of this could we cure just right off the bat? I would be very curious to see if we did a blanket experiment in the United States where I mean, maybe even we cut out the refined sugars, how much good we can do. I look at it as probably two bad revolutions. There's the agricultural revolution 10,000 years ago, which is where we started to go very wrong. But then there's also been this arguably as severe revolution of the last 60 years, which has been the pro food pyramid, pro bread, refined carbohydrate movement. And I remember like being in school and they taught us the food pyramid. They literally taught us that we were supposed to consume 10 to 12 servings of bread and refined carbs. South Park did an interesting episode
Mhm.
about that where the South Park joke was that you had to flip the food pyramid upside down. And
Yeah.
that was like the makeup of foods that we're actually supposed to be eating.
Hey guys, just want to take a second to thank our sponsor at Carnivore Bar. I don't promote many products because honestly, all you need to be healthy is to just eat meat. For those times that you're out hiking, road tripping, or stuck at work and you want a nutritious snack that is just meat, fat, and salt if you want it, the Carnivore Bar is a great option. So I like this product not because it's just pure meat, but also because I want the carnivore market to thrive as well. And the more we support meat-only products, the more meat-only products there will be available in the mainstream. So if this sounds like something you'd like to get behind, check it out using my discount code Anthony to get 10% off, which also applies to subscriptions, giving you 25% off total. All right, thanks guys.
So, okay, I have a question for you. How do you manage
Sure.
to get enough calories in your diet if you're only eating meats?
Well, the meats have the majority of the calories anyway. It's the carbohydrates in plants that would provide the energy, macros. And so when you're on a ketogenic diet, you generally replace the carbohydrates with protein and fat. And the majority of that, comes from meat. I mean, you
You
certainly
get enough fat?
yeah. So I
Yeah.
get about probably around 70 to 80% of my calories from fat.
Uh,
So I was very, very high fat down. So I get, very fatty cuts of meat and I'll
uh,
add butter to it. So instead of adding coconut oil to something, I'd add butter, grass-fed butter or tallow, grass-fed tallow. And so basically it's sort of like if a 6-year-old could pick his diet, that's basically what I eat, just ribeyes, just all the time, so like ribeyes with butter on it. And
yeah.
so yeah, so that's how you get that. And a big thing too is that ketogenic diet just means not eating carbohydrates, but then what do you replace it with? Fat and protein. And yes, you can get that some from coconut oils and things like that, but a large part of that's going to come from meat. So a lot of all these studies that, I mean, there's thousands now, thousands showing these medical improvements and benefits from being on a ketogenic diet. They all use a largely animal-based approach to that. It
Hmm.
wouldn't be like a vegetarian approach. So it's a large component of meat. I think there's added benefit from going, a carnivore diet is a ketogenic diet. It's a sort of a subset of the ketogenic diets. And I think they both work very similarly for that same reason, with the added benefit of cutting out these plant toxins that can be directly toxic. But a lot of these things are actually anti-nutrients. So there's nutrients in the plants, but just like in corn, unless you treat them, ferment them, or soak them in some sort of chemical, they're not necessarily bioavailable. So they have low bioavailability. In the 50s, they did experiments with calcium in spinach. There's a lot of calcium in spinach. And so they gave them to people, say, okay, well, so this should increase your calcium levels. In fact, their calcium levels went down. And that's because the calcium was bound up in ways that we couldn't access. And they
Hmm.
also come with a lot of oxalates, which actually get into your bloodstream and strip out the calcium out of your body. So it's not only not bioavailable, they have these anti-nutrients that block the absorption or even get into your body and strip out these nutrients. So coffee, caffeine, that can get in your body and strip out magnesium and other sorts of you know um, minerals. But also they'll stop you from absorbing them at all. So I have a patient now who is on carnivore. Everything was getting better and better and better, but his zinc sort of went down, and so he basically was drinking like a lot of coffee, and like anytime he'd eat, he'd drink coffee, and that's going to be blocking out a lot of the zinc and other sorts of things that he ate. He stopped drinking coffee, zinc went right up. There was a study with oysters, and so they gave people oysters. Oysters have a lot of zinc, and so they gave people oysters, and they checked their bloods, immediately sort of waited for the rise in the serum zinc, and it did. You had this big rise in zinc when they just ate oysters. And then another day, they ate the same amount of oysters, but with like beans. I think it was like black beans. It only went up like a quarter of the amount. So it was like 75% reduction in absorption. And then another day, they gave them like corn tortillas, no raise in the zinc at all. So it actually blocked out all the zinc entirely. So going on to just carnivore, you actually end up getting more nutrients instead of less nutrients. There are other things like protease inhibitors or tannins, and this will block protease, which is our enzyme from our pancreas that will break down proteins and break them into amino acids so we can absorb them. And then tannins, which will just bind and denature proteins so we can't break them down at all and we can't get to them. They just have to pass through undigested. So when you actually get rid of those, you actually end up getting more bang for your buck. You end up getting more of the nutrients and more of the proteins and fats that you've actually eaten. So it ends up being a bit more efficient. It also tastes better. I don't. I've never regretted dropping salad or asparagus or anything like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's actually um, extremely nutritionally dense, and then you get an added benefit from not having those anti-nutrients as well.
Wow. It's fascinating. Um, One of the things we talk a lot about in the mental health keto space is adherence.
Mhm.
And one of the arguments that doctors will make is that people aren't going to adhere to this keto diet, it's a strict diet, and the way that it needs to be done to achieve optimal maximum benefit, I mean, any benefit probably is that the adherence needs to be strict. So for people who are having a cheat meal once a week or something like that and kicking their bodies out of ketosis, we don't know a lot about this yet, unfortunately, but for many people, the relief from symptoms only come when they adhere to this diet for many, many months without cheating. And then I've talked to people who have done the diet and then they'll have, a Gatorade by mistake. They thought it was a Gatorade Zero. It's actually Gatorade with sugar. And the clinical depression comes roaring back.
Mhm.
Um, so we talk a lot about adherence. One of the things that I love about doing the keto diet, and having done it for almost 3.5 years now, strict with a couple, spoon of ice cream here and there, but really no full meals or slices of pizza or anything like that, is I allocate a lot less mental energy to trying to decide what I'm going to eat on a day-to-day basis.
Mhm.
I don't deal with the shame of eating things I'm not supposed to eat.
Mhm.
So this whole part of my life where I used to spend, okay, well, I shouldn't be eating this. Oh, I have to eat this. Okay, I'm eating too much sugar. Oh, wow, I just ate that whole, okay, I got to compensate. That whole world of mental energy has kind of been stripped away. And it's not even a question of what I'm going to eat. I know I'm going to eat some beef with butter, eggs,
Mhm.
whatever it is. Maybe I'll cut out the peanut butter now that we've had this discussion. But I love the idea of doing carnivore because it just makes this so straightforward.
Mhm.
I mean, there isn't even a question about doing avocados or, I mean, you cut out coffee, you don't drink coffee, you don't drink caffeine.
Correct. Yeah.
Have you found, has that been your experience too, where it's just you get to devote energy to other parts of your life now that this is taken care of? No coffee, no
Absolutely.
caffeine, etc.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Once you drop the coffee and caffeine, your energy is here all day. So, I normally work I have a practice in metabolic health and trying to address root cause sort of issues and use diet and lifestyle sort of interventions and therapeutic sort of ketosis and ketogenic carnivore diets to help people reverse their diseases and issues. But my main work is in neurosurgery, so it's just long hours, and you're doing on calls for 36 hours, 48 hours, sometimes longer, and it's very trying because it's very busy. My energy's here the whole time. So I wake up in the morning, I'm here. And afternoon, evening, I'm here. Even if I don't eat all day. And then it's like I'm on call and I'm busy and we're operating all night, I'm here the whole time. And so it's absolutely fantastic. So I don't have the ups and the downs. And yeah, I feel better when I'm on caffeine, but then I crash and I feel pretty gross and junky the rest of the day. Whereas otherwise, I'm just bang, just perfect energy, perfect mental clarity the whole time. And it frees up so much time and so much thought and effort to, like you say, I know what I'm going to eat. I eat typically once a day. If I'm working out more and I'm being more active physically, I'll tend to eat, twice a day. And so, I plan for that. I cook a steak. It takes no time to cook a steak, chop it up, put it in a little container, bring that to work. Um, and then, have a big steak after work or something like that. But if I'm busy and I'm going through and my body says, "Ooh, steak time, isn't it?" And it's like, yeah, well, I'm not going to be getting home till probably tomorrow night. So, I'm not going to eat for a while. And my body just says, yeah, fine, no problem. So I find that I have several hours a day that have been freed up, that I'm not thinking about preparing or eating food. And I just so much more time in my life. And I'm not just like constantly thinking, oh, what do I eat? What am I going to do? How am I going to plan? I have to shop. I have a chest full of meat. I have a fridge full of meat. It's wet aging and dry aging. It's only meat in there. There are videos on YouTube that I have
That's funny.
that I have that, like my girlfriend now, when we first started dating, she came over and I showed her my fridge and she was freaked out. She actually texted her friend. She's like, his whole fridge is full of meat. And I took a picture of it and she's like, run, get out of there. You're going to end up in that fridge if you don't get out of there. So,
Yeah,
but and now that's our fridge, and now she's fully on board with it as well. And so that's it. It's just all meat. I have big slabs of meat. I go to Costco and get a whole case of meat. I have a bunch of, ribeye, loins, the whole full thing. You keep them in that vacuum sealed pack, and you keep the seal on it. You put that in the fridge. That's wet aging. You can do that up to a month, and it just breaks down and gets more tender. It's great. And then you cut that up into steaks, a big 3-inch thick cut steaks, salted to choice. I don't use much salt anymore, but then you put it on wire racks on a baking sheet, and you just let it dry out in the refrigerator, not touching. Air has to circulate on all sides. It has to dry out. If it's moist, it'll grow bacteria, but if it's dry, it'll just dry out, and the bacteria can't grow. And it's amazing. And so I just grab a big steak every night, cook it up. If I want two, I cook two. If in the morning I want one to bring to work, I just take one out and do that. Meal prep is nothing. It takes no time. And now I have weeks worth of meals, and just grab it one steak at a time. It's amazing. So I have so much more time. It's so easy. I'm not going around going, ooh, what about this recipe? I just go straight to the meat aisle and get some steaks, and that's it. And I get those, big things of steak. Now I started ordering from a place here in Australia that does all regeneratively raised, grass-fed and finished sort of steak. So now it just comes to my door. It's even less time, and so I just grabbing steaks and throwing them on. It takes absolutely no time. It's very freeing in that. And I don't have to think about, well, I need more lettuce and I need more avocado. I need more of this. And those have gone bad. So I have to throw those out. There's meat, and I'm going to eat meat. And
that's awesome.
yeah. So
do you do like coconut oil or avocado oil or anything like that? MCT?
I typically stick to the animal fats.
Yeah.
And so there's things like, people do like, bulletproof coffee. So you can use like MCT or coconut oil or even butter. I don't drink coffee. So one thing that I've done is bulletproof water. And you just put a stick of butter into hot water, blend it up. It's actually good. It's all just creamy, warm, comforting goodness, So
Nice.
yeah, it's actually pretty good. And yeah, I typically just use the animal fats. Yeah, so I'll add like grass-fed butter to things. And then I'll get a butcher to make. I actually ordered this from that place I go to online. For people in Australia, it's just Stockman steaks, and they do grass-fed beef fat trimmings. So you just get a pack of fat, and you just cut it up into little cubes, and fry those up in a pan, and just have a little pile of fat next to the meat as well to get extra fat. Yeah, so it's fantastic.
That's badass.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, you can get them from butchers. I mean, they're really cheap too, because most butchers throw their fat trimmings away. Sometimes we use them for yeah, I know, right?
It breaks my heart, man.
They pay to get them thrown away because it's like a biohazard, because it's it's organic material, and so they can't just throw it in a dumpster. They have to like pay to get it specially taken, and so a lot of butchers will be very happy for you to take it for free or very cheap, and so you can always ask for the off-cut fat trimmings, and then just have a bag of those in the freezer, and then just chop up a whole bunch of these things and cook it up next to your steak, and have just a pile of fat next to your steak. It's good. Hey everyone, if you need a little extra help getting started on a carnivore diet, and my online resources that I have for free aren't enough for you, you can go to www.howtocarnivore.com and sign up for a 30-day carnivore challenge, where you'll have online resources, group support, weekly Zoom meetings, as well as the ability to chat live with myself, Simon Lewis, and the others in the challenge who can help you and support you and give you extra advice and help you along the way. So if that sounds like something that would be beneficial to you, then please go to howtocarnivore.com and sign up. All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you there.
Wow. Yeah, you're opening my eyes here. I feel like there's this whole universe I haven't explored yet. I always thought that to gain muscle in the gym, I needed to supplement my meat with extra calories to hit my calorie intake. So peanut butters, avocado oil, MCT oil, cream cheese, stuff like that. But I never thought of going to the butcher and asking for the extra fat. I mean, that sounds like another perfectly reasonable way to get the job done.
Yeah. And what I've found, I've never found it easier to put on muscle than when on a carnivore diet.
Yeah.
Even so, 6 years ago, when I sort of came back to this and went like, oh wow, that's what I was doing in my early 20s. I was keto at the time, not because I was doing it consciously, but I was doing humanitarian work in Bangladesh, and I'd been in refugee camps for months, and just you just eat whatever the hell's available, right? So there was I don't know if you heard, but there's a refugee crisis in southern Bangladesh. They're coming over from Myanmar, formerly Burma, because there's like a full-on genocide there with the Rohingya people. They killed like couple 100,000 people in a month and a half, and
Wow.
about 1 million people fled into southern Bangladesh. Unofficial numbers, but they're finding more mass graves as we go. So the official number is going up higher and higher. And so I went over there to help because there just really wasn't anyone helping. It was very dangerous. ISIS was very active in Bangladesh at the time, and people were just like, oof, not my problem. And so I felt even more compelled to go because no one else was going. And so I came back, and I'd just been sort of eating anything. I was trying to get back in shape, and I just felt pretty crummy when I'd eat carbs. I just had more back pain and joint pain. I was like, oh God, that just makes me feel horrible when I eat these carbs.
Yeah.
Okay, when I go for a couple of days without it, I don't have any back pain anymore. Okay. But I was trying to slim
Wow.
down. Yeah, so I just naturally went away from it. And so,
Yeah.
but I was trying to slim down and get back into rugby. And so I was eating lean meat and not much of it. And I was eating a lot of veggies, and so like, kale, spinach, and broccoli. And I was eating a ton of those and not a lot of meat. And I just never felt good. And I was like, okay, well, it's going to take a while. I'm out of shape. Haven't played like a full season in 3 years. So it's going to be a while till I get back. Um, and then, I had my aha moment that plants weren't my best friend, and that was actually really good for me, and meat was really good for me. And so I just cut out the greens and started eating a lot more fatty red meat, and it was just life changing. I mean, like overnight, I lost 23 pounds in 10 days, and then I
Wow.
just started shredding fat and stacking on muscle. And 2 weeks into it, I just felt so good. Then I went back out and started playing high level rugby, and felt amazing. I was at a dead sprint the whole time on my first night out. And so I was keeping up with everyone mid season who were all, that. So the MLR, the Major League Rugby, is now the professional league in America. That was the first year of that. And so my team in Seattle, who won the first 2 years of the MLR, that was the first season. And so I went back and was playing with them. So these are full-on professional players in their 20s. I'm 38. I played professional rugby for 10 years, but that was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was super out of shape. I felt amazing. I was just I could keep up with everybody. It was just at a dead sprint the whole time. And so, I just felt great. And that was just from getting rid of the greens, and that made a massive difference. And then increasing the amount of meat and fat in particular, that made a huge
Yeah.
difference. As far as muscle growth is concerned, and just in general health, what I've sort of come to realize is that your body can, when you're eating the right thing, that and not complicating it with carbohydrates and different sorts of things that will derange your hormonal hunger signals, like blocking leptin, and upregulating ghrelin. And leptin is our satiety hormone. Insulin blocks that. Sugar also blocks that. So does alcohol. And sugar and alcohol also upregulate ghrelin, which is going to tell us that you're hungry and you need to eat more as well. And so you overeat. It's very easy to overeat. And so If you're not doing that, and also lectins, these different sort of plant toxins can actually bind to the insulin receptors 5 times more tightly than insulin. So that's something to know about too in the ketogenic space, is that a lot of these lectins can actually still act on insulin and lower your ketones and start
Oh,
deranging.
fascinating.
Yeah, and start deranging things in a similar fashion to insulin, even though you're not eating any carbs. And so, some people find when they drop all of that, they get even more improvement on just a ketogenic carnivore diet. And so when you have all those other outside influences away and you're eating your a biologically designed diet, your biologically appropriate diet, which I think a carnivore diet is, your body tells you how much to eat. It goes by taste. You eat fatty meat until it stops tasting good. Every bite will taste slightly less good because you get sort of negative feedback, and eventually it won't taste good at all. And so at first it tastes amazing, and then by the end of the meal, you're like, oh, it doesn't really taste good anymore. Or that you get that bite that sort of tastes like cardboard. It's just pretty bland. That's your brain telling you we're good now. You can overdo it. You can force yourself. If you keep eating, it'll actually start tasting bad, and you'll start getting physically revolted. And people talk about how they get nauseous and they have to force themselves. It takes 2 hours to finish. And I always tell them, like, well, actually, you were done eating 2 hours ago. Your body was telling you, don't eat this. You're done. And I find that when I'm lifting weights and working out, I can put on muscle at 44 easier than at any other point in my life, except in my early 20s when I was doing this. Um, Far easier. And it's always
Wow.
lean. I never put on any fat, anything like that. It's just lean body mass, lean muscle mass. And
Yeah.
it's very easy. But my appetite naturally increases. So I may not be able to eat as much because, just stomach capacity. So I'll eat, 2 pounds, 2.5 pounds of like ribeye. And I'll be like, well, that's enough for me. But then I'll wake up in the morning and go like, I want another one. And so I'll cook like another ribeye, chop it up, put it into a container, and I'm generally like eating it with a fork in the car, or like if I've been known to be a bit more brutish and actually like just have the steak and just eat it
Sure.
like
Yeah.
hand food, like
Yeah.
driving in the car is like a hand steak. But T-bones are really good for that. Pro tip, you just hold the bone. It's like a meat popsicle, and you just sort of eat it off like that. And
Uh-huh.
so do that. And so when I'm able to eat enough, if I'm working out and I'm able to eat enough, you slam on weight. So you don't necessarily need to have an excess of calories, a caloric excess, because excess means you're going to put it into fat. It's surplus to demand, right? You just need enough, and your body will tell you. Your body will tell you how much you need, and so you just eat until fatty meat stops tasting good. And if you're working out, you try it twice a day, and you'll slam on muscle
You eat
easily.
twice a day
Yeah,
if you're
if I'm
trying to
working out, yeah, I have to eat
eat
twice a
twice a
day.
day. Yeah.
Yeah. You go back to the Mongolians, Genghis Khan, the Mongol horde, they were carnivores. They ate horse meat,
Yeah.
drank horse blood, and fermented mare's milk. And they would go sometimes up to 5 days without eating, just ravaging the countryside, which is a huge advantage because they didn't have cook fires or anything like that, out. So no other armies knew where the hell they were, because you tell where an army was by all these like fires and camp cook fires and smoke going up. They had no idea. They had no idea where these were. And all of a sudden, bam, they were on you, and you were in
Hmm.
trouble. And they go like 5 days without eating, and then they eat 10 pounds of horse meat and do it again, And they might drink blood, during that time as well. But yeah, you just when I'm lifting weights and my body wants to put on muscle, I will have to eat twice a day. If I'm not able to eat enough, I won't put on as much weight. Yeah, you're right. If you're not getting enough building blocks, you're not gonna be able to build up the structures. But I find that my natural hunger signals will tell me where that is. And so you eat fatty meat until it stops tasting good. And if you're working out, you try that at least twice a day. And some people be fine with once a day, but most people need twice a day if they're really challenging themselves to put on a lot of muscle.
How did we get this 5 meals a day,
Mm.
35 grams of protein each, and carbs before your workout thing in bodybuilding?
Oh
It's
God.
just, let me turn my light on. It's getting dark here. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's wild, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I was sold a huge bag of lies when I started lifting. I didn't even think I was going to be able to put on mass doing a keto diet
Mm.
when I was 185 pounds, and I put on 30 pounds in the last 3 years doing the
Nice.
keto diet. And I would watch these YouTube videos and they'd be like, yeah, like, oh, keto, you're not going to gain any muscle. You need carbs to fuel your workouts.
Mm.
You need glycogen stores and all this nonsense.
Hmm.
And but then as I started to gain strength in the gym and my lifts improved, and I was just thinking to myself, how is this possible that all of these influencers and fitness YouTubers and bodybuilders and strongmen are telling me that it's impossible to do this on a ketogenic diet,
Hmm.
but yet I'm gaining mass and strength in the gym. I was eating a lot. I mean, I still do, but it was really frustrating for me when I was actually doing this successfully,
Hmm.
and my friends would tell me, "No, bro, this isn't going to work for you." You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's a lot of bro science there, and some of
Yeah.
that's stemming from previous misconceptions about biochemistry. Back in the golden era of bodybuilding, you had Vince Gironda and things like that. He's called like the Iron Guru, and he trained a lot of the early Mr. Olympians, and the guy was just absolutely jacked. I mean, his pictures of him like in his 50s, just looking like a statue. He did carnivore, steak and eggs, steak and eggs, steak and eggs, and he went back to same way what I'm doing, looking back. Well, what have humans been eating? Since time immemorial. And someone even asked him, say, "Oh, well, there's this new diet that come out, there's new diet books that come out. What do you think about it?" And he said, "I haven't read a diet book by anyone who's been alive in the last 50,000 years. That's not what I
Nice.
look at. I look at what people have been doing, since our origins as humans." But one thing he did do was once a week he would carb load. And that's what he thought. He said, yeah, you need to replenish your liver glycogen, and the only way to do that is with carbs. So one day a week you eat a whole bunch of carbs. And that's what he thought, because that was what the biochemical thinking was at the time. And so now we know that no, you don't need to eat carbohydrates. In fact, there's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. You make all the glycogen and blood sugar that you need. You don't have much. There's only about 4 grams of blood sugar in your body at any given time. It's not much. It's only 4 grams, and that runs all your physiological processes of your body, organs, and brain. And so it's really not all that much. So it's easy to make. And you do make it. You make liver glycogen and muscle glycogen. In fact, there are studies in athletes and human athletes, so this is not like animal studies, showing that in a ketogenic state, you actually replenish your muscle and liver glycogen faster from your own body fat than athletes who are sucking down sugar water, like Gatorade and things like that. So it's actually better as an athlete. You actually get more glycogen. So, that could be where it's from. People like Garanda were very influential, but even he only ate carbs once a week. He was eating just steak and eggs, steak and eggs, steak and
Man, I
eggs.
don't envy that guy. Once a week, just load them up and then
Yeah.
you're depleted for the next 6 days.
Yeah, yeah, and it takes days to get into ketosis and all that sort of stuff again. So yeah, and then
But
Serge
you can
Nubra.
never get keto adapted. You're just
Yeah,
like starting to get keto adapted 6 days in, and you just flood your system with carbs again.
that's it.
Sounds
Yeah.
unpleasant.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's probably better than eating carbs every day, but it's just like drinking once a week is better than drinking every day. But yeah, no, it's not gonna be good for you. But yeah, you make your own glycogen, you make your own ketones. And that's what people forget. Oh, you have to have carbohydrates to put on muscle. Our muscle is muscle made out of carbohydrates now? Did I miss something? And no, it's protein. You need protein. In fact, cholesterol, all your hormones are made out of cholesterol, testosterone, estrogen, progestogens, mineralocorticoids, glucocorticoids, all these things are all made out of cholesterol. Vitamin D, which is also a steroid hormone, is synthesized from cholesterol as well. And so, you need cholesterol. And in fact, there are studies that came out, I think, 2 years ago that showed that dietary cholesterol intake was an independent marker for muscle growth and hypertrophy. You needed that just like you needed intakes of protein. I think another reason why, in the era of the mass monsters, we're eating all these carbs and then doing this dirty bulk, they're bulking up and oh, we're getting all bulk. Look at all this muscle I'm putting on. You have to have carbs to put on all this muscle. It's not muscle. It's you store, because blood sugar above 4 grams is actually toxic to the body. It actually starts damaging you. This is what kills diabetics, is having that just 1 extra gram, going up to 5 grams instead of 4 grams. That kills you over time. And it's called glycation. Those glucose molecules, little rings, they physically fuse to other molecules called glycation, and that permanently damages them. And this is why diabetics end up breaking down and deteriorating, having to get their feet amputated, then their legs, and their kidneys fail, and their heart fails, their brain fails. Alzheimer's is being called type 3 diabetes now, and then they die, right? And that's all from 1 extra gram of glucose in your body. That's how toxic that is past that level. So your body's desperately trying to keep this down. And so it's important enough for your body to get that blood glucose down under 4 grams that it's willing to slam up your insulin and completely derange all these 100+ different mechanisms in your body, because that right there is the acute emergency, is having that high blood sugar. So now you're just stuffing this blood sugar in every single different orifice in your body. So you build up fat. But you also put fat where? In your stomach? Sure, yeah, but you also stick it in your muscles. It's called myosteatosis. So this intramuscular fat. It's this, that sort of fatty marbling. You can think of it as like human marbling. Same thing we do with cows. How do we marble them? We give them grains. We give them carbs, right?
Yeah.
And that causes that intramuscular fat, that myosteatosis. It also causes glycogen deposition in the muscles, and one glycogen molecule attracts 2 water molecules. And so now you've got muscles that are stuffed full with glycogen, and they bring water with them, and they've got fat. And so now you've got these bulky looking muscles, but there's no muscle in it. I mean, there is muscle, but most of it's fat, water, and glycogen. And then they bulk up, like, wow, look at all this muscle I gained. And then they go ketogenic. Like a lot of these bodybuilders will then just do like lean protein, and they won't even have the fat, and they'll just cut out carbs and just basically have protein, which is not good for you. You don't want the majority of your energy coming from protein. You need it from another source, even if it's carbohydrates, but ideally fat. And then all that goes away. So now they're getting rid of the glycogen, they're getting rid of the water weight, and they're getting rid of the myosteatosis. And they're like, oh yeah, I lost like 40 pounds of muscle, 50 pounds of muscle. I'm like, no, you didn't. That wasn't muscle in the first place. That was all this fake stuff. And so that's what people think. And so they think it's like, oh, you have these carbs and you'll bulk up so much faster. No, it's not lean body mass. You'll lose that. That's during the bulking phase. And then you have the cutting phase, and you lose a lot of that muscle. It's not muscle. It was never muscle in the first place. And so, when we work out, it's just muscle. It's just lean body mass, especially if you're just eating just meat, you're just putting on lean body mass. So when I work out and I push myself, I can put on muscle very easily, and it's all muscle. It doesn't go away. When I change up my diet or do something different, it just stays there. And so it's very stable. So it's which is nice, because I don't always have like I said, my schedule is a bit out there, so I don't always have a chance to go to the gym. And so it might be weeks or even months between gym sessions, but everything stays the same. I just maintain, my physique, which is a lot better than it was before. Even just eating a very clean, omnivorous diet, mostly ketogenic, because I never really ate a lot of bread and pasta. When I was cooking for myself, it was generally meat and some salad, because I felt I had to, because people, just say like, oh, you have to do that. I'm like, fine. And could not stay in shape without working out. Even, after 2 weeks out of the gym, 2 weeks out of, playing and training, I would start softening up, putting on fat, losing muscle. And that was just with vegetables mostly, maybe some carbs here and there, but I wouldn't really think about it, because I wasn't avoiding them strictly at that point. But I just tended to eat really clean anyway, and I would get out of shape. Whereas now I stay pretty much the same. Doesn't matter how long I've been out of the gym. It's pretty amazing.
That's amazing. Man, I would love to talk to you all night, but I gotta get off the screens here. It's
Yeah,
getting to that hour here in
no worries,
the
man.
West Coast.
Yeah.
This was super, super fun. I learned so much. I
Yeah.
really learned a lot.
Oh, good, man. Well,
Yeah.
look, I really appreciate you coming on. I'm happy to talk to you more about this if you want, sort of, off air and things like that. If you have any questions. And but I just really appreciate you coming on, man, because like, mental health is a very, very serious issue that affects so many people, and a lot of, and like you say, there has traditionally been a stigma for that, and people can feel quite self-conscious and embarrassed about talking about it. So I really appreciate you being brave enough to talk about your experiences with it, and you're talking about how your recovery with it, how much better you became as a result of your dietary changes, because that's going to go out there and that's going to help other people, and that's going to encourage them and give them the incentive and the courage to really try this themselves. And so I really appreciate you stepping up and helping with that.
Thanks, man. Of course, it's all about showing the next person. I mean, I know how terrible some of this stuff can be. So when we have a solution like this that works, when we have a treatment that anyone can do, I
Mhm.
mean, this doesn't take a doctor, this doesn't take a prescription. It's um
Yeah.
it's my obligation to share it with the world, which is why I share the story as well.
Well, that's great, man. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Well, Matt, thank you so much. Can you tell us, do you have social media or anywhere else that people can find you, follow you, and find out more?
Not really. Metabolic Mind is a YouTube channel where
Yeah,
we have all the information if you want to get started with this yourself. And Dr. Brett
great.
Share runs that. He does a great job.
Perfect. All right. Well, I'll put links to that down in the description, and people can check that out if they want to learn more. Matt, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Sure.
Hey guys, thank you very much for taking the time out to listen to what I had to say. If you like it, then please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel and podcast. And if you're on YouTube, then please hit that little bell and subscribe, and that'll let you know anytime I have a new video out, which should be every week, if not more. And if you could share this with your friends, that would help me get the word out and let me know that you like what I'm doing. Thanks again, guys.